Ok, gente. Alô, alô. Boa tarde, todo mundo, né? Eu sou Vera Paiva, professora desse instituto. Para quem não me conhece, vou começar falando em português, embora a palestra e a conversa vai ser em inglês. Eu não sei se vocês estão avisados disso, né? Mas para ir aquecendo aos poucos, eu começo em português, né? A palestra vai ser em inglês, mas os slides estão em português. De qualquer maneira, eu e o Veriano acho que pode ajudar, mas alguém que quiser ajudar, qualquer questão que a gente puder ajudar com a língua, a gente está disponível. Só não vamos fazer, ele fala, a gente traduz, ele fala, a gente traduz, porque senão a gente não consegue aproveitar a presença do professor, né? Então, é um prazer ter de novo o Robert Cleave aqui com a gente, né? O Robert nos procurou ao Instituto de Psicologia há 4 anos atrás. How many years ago? 4 anos atrás, porque ele queria desenvolver um projeto de pesquisa no Brasil, queria uma base institucional, e ele estava fazendo o doutorado dele naquele momento. E ele lembrou agora que eu conversei com ele por 3 horas, literalmente, né? Vocês que me conhecem melhor sabem como dura eu posso ser, né? Para avaliar quais eram as intenções éticas do trabalho dele aqui, para deixar claro, e ele entendeu bem, né, que uma pesquisa no Brasil não era para recolher os dados e ir embora e nunca mais voltar, não era. Era estabelecer uma colaboração, né, com os entrevistados, devolver, né, para a comunidade que se dispôs a participar da pesquisa os resultados, né, e ter certeza que ele estivesse aqui, né, entendendo as experiências, no caso dos rapazes homossexuais, nos termos deles, e não com uma visão estrangeira, né? Depois dessa surra, ele aceitou, né? Fez um maravilhoso trabalho que eu tive o prazer de acompanhar na banca, né? E acompanhar aqui, né? Virou doutor e foi contratado pela Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Tá certo? Então, hoje, eu fico muito feliz de apresentar para vocês o professor Robert Cleave, né? Pode ser o caminho de vocês amanhã. Tá? Foi o do Veriano, foi o meu. Quem sabe essa conversa estimule vocês a fazer pesquisas relevantes, né, cujo objetivo final, e foi isso que eu queria ouvir na primeira conversa, é diminuir o sofrimento psicossocial dos jovens homossexuais, né, melhorar a qualidade de vida desses jovens, né, que é o que eu acho que o trabalho dele faz. Ele repetiu o trabalho dele aqui na Turquia, em Chicago, foi a mesma pesquisa, né, nos 3, semelhante, né? E agora eu deixo vocês com o Robert para ele apresentar, então, de novo no compromisso ético de estar sempre devolvendo esse trabalho, tá? Então, Robert, up to you.
Obrigado. Thank you, Vera. Boa tarde. Welcome to everyone. I'm really very happy and honored to be here again. I came to Brazil for 2 months in 2012 to conduct my research. And I worked with 2 NGOs, Projeto Pulparina. Wrong. I always say Pulparina. E Corsa. So I collected narratives, the stories of 12 youth in Chicago, 12 in São Paulo, and we frame as a cultural experience. But today we will talk about how culture is defined and how difficult it is given diversity. No city or nation is any longer pure in their culture. There is many, many different cultures within. So we will frame within the macro culture, the overall culture of a city, state, nation, and the microculture. How this is framed within the idea of marginalized, stigmatized communities, and how they maintain citizenship as a microculture within the macroculture, okay? And if you have questions, please interact with me. I don't like to just talk. I like to hear your ideas, and Dr. Paiva will also assist us with language, okay?
The idea is that you talk for 45 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
then we open for questions.
Okay?
But you may do that.
Feel free, yes. So to introduce the research, I am in a program called International Psychology. So what the purpose of this program is to move beyond traditional Western concepts of psychology to be more inclusive of a global situation. Okay, and many of the authors that are talking now today about global or international psychology frame this in three major areas. Intergroup conflict happens within a nation, between nations, vulnerable populations for women, for children who are sometimes oppressed or natural survivors of the conflict that's going on around them, and also social justice, social responsibility. What role do we play as psychologists, as counselors, to participate in this very important dialogue about inclusion and about citizenship, okay? So we will use this word a lot today, citizenship, belonging within this. So in the context of the original research that I did, I wanted to look, because it was a dissertation, I didn't want it to last forever. You're all working on research, right? So you know you have to put a limit on how much you want to gather for data. So you can finish someday. So my supervisor said I was going to initially do the Middle East, US, and South America. No, it's too much. So I picked Brazil because I came as part of the school, the international program, when I was a student. I had the opportunity to come to Brazil as a required field experience. Kind of like a field trip, only much more academically focused. We worked with NGOs, Caritas, Santa Marcelina Hospital, CAPS programs. So we had many different opportunities to see how SUS works in your system and how it measures and matches to the US system. Recently, just last week, I am the faculty lead for all of the students that now come to Brazil. So we had 12 students here in São Paulo and had a wonderful time. They loved being in São Paulo. We went to Santa Marcelina Hospital. We visited Caritas Santa Susana to see how their school program worked, and CAPS in the Santa Marcelina area for substance abuse adults and children. So they had a very rich experience about how does São Paulo, how does Brazil work with mental health issues in general. So it's a very important opportunity for them to have as potential international psychologists. So when I developed my research, I had a specific passion to understand what the lived or human experience is of gay youth who are making the decision to disclose their sexual identity. Because it's not just a one-time event, right? It is a long process that you go through from the time you discover that you're gay. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm the only one in the world that has this. It's a disease, and then you have your parents telling you, it's like, oh no, gay people are crazy, they're this, they're that, and you're like, so I must be crazy. And then you have religion telling you you are evil, so you must be evil. Other people are just saying you're feminine, so I must be a girl. So you have all of this conflict, what we call dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance. And it's a huge struggle for you because you don't know what to do. So in my situation, I made the decision to get married to a woman. I have children, but directly impacting many lives, right? I didn't know anybody who was gay when I was growing up. I had no idea. how do you do this? You know, I must be the only one in the world because I don't know anybody else. So then, after I got married, and I go to college, all of a sudden, I'm meeting all these gay people. So I'm like, oh, I guess I'm not the only one in the world. But the impact on the people that I love was significant, right? My ex-wife, she's still mad at me. So she's, you know, and I don't blame her, but, you know, it's like, okay, it's been 20 years, time to get over it, move on. And my son and my daughter are lovely. They accept me for who I am, and they know that whoever they are as people, they are welcome in my life, you know. But with their mother, if they were gay, no, you go live with your father. So I think that this was the passion that drove me to try and understand more about it. And how could I help youth to not, it's not a mistake if you get married or if you have children, but it does have a direct impact on people. And what I wanted to try and do is help people to understand how can we help youth feel more comfortable, to feel safe, to provide a space for them. So in the process of doing the research, I tried to understand by asking very deep questions. Some of the interviews lasted an hour and a half about when did you discover that you were gay? How did you feel? How did the people around you react? So I had many helpers here in Brazil, which was wonderful, who helped me do it in Portuguese, so that we got the real context. If I tried to do in English, people struggle. They struggle to find the right word, right? But in Portuguese, they are able to tell you in the words. So I had all of the narratives, the stories, transcribed into Portuguese and then translated into English. Then I took all of the stories from the US, all of the stories from Brazil, and I started to compare them. And one of the things that I encourage my students to think about in cross-cultural or multicultural work is to not only expect the differences, look for the similarities, look for the universals that make us human, right? It's all about how do we connect as people, not how are we different. Who cares, you know, why we're different? Let's try and understand what makes us the same and how we can connect with each other. This is really important. So there's a 4-stage process to doing the research. The first stage is the inception. And I just told you a little bit about my passion, about why I decided to do this type of research. When you decide to do your research, how many people are conducting any kind of research right now? Okay, so you know, trying to come up with a research question, what is important? Why do I want to answer this? Who cares, right? You want to do research that people care about and that you care about. Otherwise, you lose your passion. You're like, oh my God, this is so boring. I don't want to do this anymore. Even when you love it, you get to a point where, I'm tired of this topic. The next stage is collaboration. It's so critical for cross-cultural and multicultural work to have respectful collaboration with the people you work with. I had the amazing opportunity of working with Dr. Paiva here, and she connected me to 2 wonderful people, Edice Modesto, who runs Project, and Lula Ramirez, not Lula the president, but Lula Ramirez, who is the director of Corsa. So they helped me to gather participants. And I'll show you, I put together a tree that shows you how we all connected. But the collaboration part is key for you to be successful. You will never be able to go to another country and succeed at collecting data if you are not connected to the people and that you haven't had a respectful conversation with them about what your motivation is. Why do you care about Brazil? What do you care? Why are you doing this? Why should we trust you? Why should we? And then you go through the IRB process, which is another nightmare, right? So we talk a little bit about doing multiple IRBs to get permission to do human subject research. It's a challenge, but it's worth it. The third stage, is it still CONEP? Okay. Now it's short? Oh, okay. It's a small piece, yeah, yeah. The next stage is the methodology that you use. I did a qualitative study instead of a quantitative because I felt the lived experiences of people should not be quantified into numbers. We shouldn't reduce people into these categories. I wanted to hear their story and be able to use all of their story, right? So I used grounded theory, which is a qualitative methodology. Kathy Sharma has written many books about this. And I don't know, are you familiar with the different types of qualitative research? There's narrative, phenomenological, case study, grounded theory, ethnography, and now there's a new one called netnography, where you can do research online. So one of my colleagues did a social, what did he call it? He was in Shanghai. So the other thing is that I didn't explain is that our students in our program are all over the world. It's completely online. So when I teach my classes, the students are from everywhere. They can be in any time zone. So he did a study on branding, city branding of Shanghai, because he was living in Shanghai at the time. So he went to all of the blogs where people were talking about their experience as expats and visitors to Shanghai and took this data. He has tons and mounds of data, right? But he pulled through to see what are the key elements that make Shanghai appealing, right? Shanghai has this desire to match New York and London. So he did this study about what aspects of Shanghai are appealing enough to bring people, okay? So there's many options to doing qualitative work in addition to quantitative. Some people say that the qualitative, it doesn't have the same validity, it doesn't have the same credibility, but it's our job to start building the literature so it does have credibility and doing it the right way, right? So that's one of the things that with the assistance of Dr. Paiva and my other committee members, we really dug into this in a way that made it very valid, okay? And it was very important. And then it's important to talk about your results. I think it was last October, October 2013, that I came back to USP and I presented. These are the results. So you have to give something back. If you're going to do the work and you're going to ask people to help you, you need to return something. You need to give something back. And the results are important in all of the cultures. Okay? Hello. So what I wanted to do is talk a little about how we can frame macro cultures. Have you heard this concept before? The macro and micro? A lot of times it's used for economics, right? So the macro, the dominant culture, in the US, it would be white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant men, right? I guess like me. So that is the macro. But what's happening now is what we're seeing is that the macro, because there's so much diversity, and I don't know if you follow what's going on in the US and how crazy it is with our politicians. You guys have the same problem here, I know, with Dilma and corruption and scandals and all that stuff. But the macro is beginning to get shaky. It's beginning to dissolve. You know, they don't know what to do because all of the groups around them are starting to outnumber them. The Hispanic community in Chicago by 2020 will outnumber the Anglo-Saxons, the whites, and the blacks. So it's like you have to stop getting people angry at you. Sooner or later, there's going to be more, right? And then you have a revolution. So just treat everybody nice. It's an easier way to do it. But for our purposes today, the microculture we will look at is the LGBT community. Did you have a question? No. Okay. And even though the LGBT community is a marginalized, pushed to the side, not given credibility, stigmatized, has many negative concepts attached to it, it is a very powerful community because what we're realizing is there's many, many numbers. There's many, many gay people out there, right? Millions. So why do you want to keep, excuse my language, but why do you want to keep pissing off the gay people? All right? Stop. They have lots of money. They have disposable income. You know, they have good jobs. They can support you in your political aspirations. Why are you making them angry? You know? Go after their cause. So this is the part of social justice and advocacy that we are encouraging our politicians to take part in. In Indiana, well, state of the United States, the governor recently passed a law that allowed you to discriminate against gay people. Well, really? Well, what happened was all of the big businesses, Apple, Google, big businesses, billions of dollars, they said, no, we will leave Indiana if you do this. And the governor had to rescind the law. And it was a very, very powerful moment. It was very exciting because finally the voice was heard. And people that had nothing to do with being gay were saying, if you discriminate against them, you will discriminate against us. We're not going to have it anymore. So it was very powerful. And one of the things that we'll talk about when I went to Turkey is the idea that they have bigger problems to worry about than gay people. They're like, let them be gay. Who cares? Let them live their lives the way they want. We're worried about Syria coming up and taking over our country. You know, we have bigger problems to worry about, okay? So the point is that as we look at culture, how would you guys define culture? Give me some definitions of what you think. Anything. What does it mean when we say culture? Come on, don't be shy. It's not an easy concept, right? But if somebody says, well, what culture do you belong to?
It's the set of customs, habits, and language that are given communities to share. Again, among its members.
Very good. Including the artifacts that they produce, right? So culture, very often we think of as art, language, the way people represent themselves. All right? But what other kinds of aspects of culture are important? When you think of culture, who do you usually think of? What kind of groups? Nationality, huh? National groups, ethnic groups, racial groups, right? Religious groups. So as we broaden this concept of culture, one of the groups that I have said, let's include gay people as a culture in themselves. Not Western gay people, not South American gay people, not Turkish gay people, but gay culture globally. So as we start to have these discourses and these dialogues about what the concept of gay culture is and how people define themselves, we will see an entire continuum of diversity within that culture. We all know, for those of you that are gay, the gay community isn't necessarily supportive of each other, right? It's, oh, they're too fat, they're too skinny, they're not pretty enough, they're blah, blah, blah. And instead of embracing and working together as a culture, they're very divisive. And they discriminate against each other. We're as bad as anybody else is, right? Oh, he doesn't have the right shoes on. So it's ridiculous that we treat each other like this. But I think that if we start to look at the culture of being gay and the inclusion of it, then when we start to filter into the macro, one of the mistakes, and Dr. Paiva was very instrumental in helping me understand in Brazil, that in the United States we were very focused on marriage equality. And it doesn't make sense to me. I don't want to get married again. How is this helping me? This is a broader context of a human rights issue. And this is what was introduced to me. She said, no, stop looking at this as gay rights, start looking at it as human rights. And it was such an important thing for me to be able to start to grasp. So when we start embracing the idea of what are human rights, do as gay people we have the legitimacy, the opportunity, and the right to be equal citizens. And in our own minds, very often we've decided, no, we don't. But in reality, we have to start having self-esteem, self-confidence, doing jobs like this, doing jobs like you guys are doing, to advocate, to state, no, I'm not going to be marginalized anymore. It's very important, okay? So as we look at how the micro community of being gay inserts into the macro community of whether it's in the United States, in Brazil, or Turkey, you will see variations of the ability to be inclusive, to be included in that dialogue, okay? So some of the two aspects that I wanted to try and focus on today was the human rights aspect and the religious aspect. Number one, because in the US, religion controls much of politics. In Brazil, would you say religion controls politics? In Turkey, it's a little more neutral, but being able to interview Muslim youth who are gay was so incredible because their stories were so powerful. These were not youth that grew up in Istanbul. These were youth that grew up in the southeast villages and immigrated on their own to Istanbul under the guise of, I want to go to school. So when I worked with Bilgi University, and a lot of the students that were there because they needed to get away from their families, right? So we'll talk a little bit about how religion informed that process for them. Everyone is familiar with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Why did this happen? Why did we need a Universal Declaration of Human Rights? What was the event that caused it? Come on, guys. World War II, right? Okay. So the atrocities that Hitler committed were deemed so heinous that no longer were people willing to, and Eleanor Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt's wife, was the one who said, wait a minute, we need to stop this. This should never, ever happen again. That an entire group of people have genocide committed against them and an attempt to wipe them off of the face of the earth with no logic behind it, right? Hitler was a good salesman, but he was a little crazy, right? So I think that in developing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the purpose was to see if we could get many, many countries to buy into the idea that we would never let this happen again. Since that time, can you name any other genocides? What other genocide happened? There's been several. We need to do a history lesson. Rwanda, excellent. Where else? Vietnam was a sort of genocide, yeah. The U.S. had no business being involved in, and yet, here we go. Just like Iraq, but that's a whole other story. Good. Where else? Afghanistan? Good.
Brazilian Indians.
The indigenous people almost everywhere, right? In the US, in Brazil, everywhere. How about in Bosnia, Herzegovina? Genocide. How about in Turkey? The Armenian genocide. And what's interesting is that historians, the people who write history books, can completely eliminate that knowledge if they want. In Turkey, no history books discuss Armenian genocide. They completely deny it. So the Armenian people talk about marginalized and stigmatized. They have no history. And when they say, but you killed our history, you ruined our history, there's museums in Bosnia that are locked up with all the artifacts of their culture, and to pretend like they no longer exist. So the whole point of having a Universal Declaration of Human Rights is that we will no longer allow genocides to wipe out any kind of community at all. We also have the travesty that's going on in the Middle East with ISIS and these decisions about how religious text is interpreted to be convenient to support ideologies. The Bible is used this way, the Quran is used this way, and that's a whole nother discussion. Hermeneutic analysis is the idea of how religious text is interpreted, and even when you're doing qualitative research, you use hermeneutic analysis. I take the narratives, the stories, and based on my development and my ideas and my knowledge, I interpret what this means, right? So it can be considered very biased. Universalisms, global ideas, it's an ideology, it's a philosophy where all human beings are the same, right? We know that there's differences, but biologically, when we take everything down to an atom, we are the same, right? So we have the same composition of water in our bodies. We need blood in order to live. We need oxygen. We need food. But relativism is also the context of how culture informs. Sometimes we can think of it as nationality, ethnicity, however you want to frame it. But these are all important concepts. Sociocultural development is the idea of what you learn as you grow up. So my experience with my parents, my teachers, my police officers, my grandparents, makes me who I am today, because this is how they taught me to think. For each one of you, we could develop a whole sociocultural development and try and understand exactly what that means, who you are as a person. Everybody is an individual, but it also is important to consider this in context of doing the research. If I'm drawing things from my sociocultural development, I have to make sure that I step away from that and try and neutralize so that I can understand what somebody else's lived experience is. This is very critical. We talked about the macro and the micro. So some of the universalisms that I've discovered in doing my research, and when I approached it initially with just US and Brazil, I used grounded theory, but I didn't have enough data to take it all the way to a theoretical concept, right? All I could really do is identify some common themes, which I'll share with you in a minute. But as I added the Turkish data, and I'm going to start referring to it as almost municipal data, because it doesn't mean that Istanbul is representative of all of Turkey, that Sao Paulo is representative of all of Brazil, and Chicago certainly isn't representative of all the US. So it's important to kind of start, for me as a researcher, to start really conceptualizing and calling it what it is. But the universalisms that I'm beginning to discover, and I want to continue to add different cultures to the research, is the fear of rejection. This is a universal concept that I've discovered in almost every single interview that I did. What if I tell somebody and they don't love me anymore? It's a constant all the way across. It doesn't matter what culture you're part of. This is a human concept. Accessing information. When I was growing up, I'll date myself a little bit, that I didn't have internet access the way you guys do. Now, with global technology, you have all the information at your fingertips. Short of your parents going in and looking at what your Google history is, they don't know, and most parents aren't sophisticated enough to do it anyway, but they don't know what sites you're looking at, right? Whether it's porn or whatever. But I think that this is an important piece, is with global technology, this is an access to information point that I didn't even think about until I started doing the interviews with the younger kids. So everybody in my studies had to be between 18 and 21. I originally wanted to do 15 to 18-year-olds, But the IRB said, no way. You need to get parental consent. And I said, if I get parental consent, then I will out them. Well, you have to do it. So I said, I'll change the age. I'll do 18 to 21. And I said, when you were younger, what was your experience like? So we figured a way to get around it. The influence of religion, which is critical, and then support systems are also a critical piece to have in place whenever anybody's making the decision to disclose. That ability to, if I tell my mom, if I tell my dad, and they do reject me, what is my plan? Who will support me in this decision, right? And that's a critical piece that almost every kid has thought about, which is really quite impressive. I was very impressed when that piece came out. Any questions or thoughts so far? It's all perfectly clear. You guys could repeat the study and do it. Okay, great. So these are just some questions that I like to pose when you're approaching your research, right? What's the inception? What's the starting point? What is your passion? Do something that you're passionate about. We don't need to go through all of these questions because at this point it's not the point of the presentation, but it's just something to get your minds thinking. The next step is a collaboration, and this is very critical. When you think about doing multicultural work, cross-border work, international work, you have to have access to people in other countries. And every interaction that you have, when I was talking about my research, no matter who I was talking to or what it was about, oh, by the way, did I tell you I'm doing this research? Do you happen to know anybody that lives in South America? Or do you happen to know anybody that lives? And people were tired of me talking, but eventually it worked. And when I said to Dr. Pisana, who's my professor, she said, oh, I know Vera. She's at the University of São Paulo. We will connect you. And eventually these connections happen. But they have to be nurtured. You have to be prepared. When you go to present your proposal, know what you're talking about. Don't go in and go, well, I'm kind of thinking about maybe doing like, map it out, be very clear, be very confident in what you want to do. And Vera was very passionate about making sure that that I was committed to doing what I wanted to do, right? So just as a kind of a visual, this is the tree of how I developed these collaborations. The TPAN AIDS ride is a 700-mile bike ride, 700 kilometers bike ride to raise money for AIDS. I went on this ride. When I was at lunch one day, I was talking about my research, and I met Nancy Mullen. She was the director of Youth Outlook. She goes, oh, if you want to come and present to the board of directors on your research, our kids can take part in this. Great. Okay, get back on my bike, ride some more. And we talked more. Then I met Kelly Geisslin, who was at, so they have all these different stations, right? So you eat lunch at one station, you ride 100 miles, and then you get dinner. And Kelly was at the last station. I started telling her about my research. She was very excited, and she's on the board of directors. So in addition to that, that connected, and then also on the AIDS ride, if you follow it all the way through, Michael Dentato was on the board of directors of Center on Halsted. So he said, oh, you can come to Center on Halsted, which is a gay, I don't know what you would call it here, kind of just a facility where you can go hang out, and advocacy center. It was just a fun place. So just by having these conversations, Michael Dentato is a professor at Loyola University. Nancy was the director, and Kelly was on the board of directors. So having these really respectful dialogues really can go a long way. So I encourage you, if you're going on to do your doctoral work or your master's work, about thinking about your thesis and your dissertation, how can you accomplish this in the way that you want to? For São Paulo, we kind of talked about that whole stream of events. Dr. Pisana introduced me to Dr. Paiva. Dr. De Silva is the director at Santa Marcelina Hospital. And then I met Adiche. How's Fabio? Did he graduate? Fabio led. Ah, good for him. And Lula. Good. So these were all the people. Fabio, poor Fabio, Vera said, Fabio, don't you have an extra room at your house? And he said, yeah. And Vera said, oh, well, Robert's going to come and live with you. And he's like, what? And I'm like, perfect, that's great. So, but it was a really wonderful opportunity for me to get cultural background from him. So it was a very powerful experience. It was really wonderful. And then when I went to Istanbul, I had a connection at Bilgi University, which is in the heart of Istanbul. Adil Isik is the director of the psychology program. And then one of her students is Damian Miles. He has a radio show called Miles to Hollywood. And normally he talks about these like crazy movies and that kind of stuff. He says, no, come on the show, talk about your research, and you can recruit participants for it. And this was all the result of a presentation that I did at the university. So through that, I was able to meet the different Lambda Istanbul. Do you guys have Lambda here, the legal organization? Okay, so Lambda, SPOD. And when I went to do my research in Turkey, it happened to be Pride. So it was in June. So I was able to attend their Pride Parade, which I know your guys is the biggest in the world. So it doesn't compare. But what was really interesting is that during the Pride Parade, Ramadan was happening as well. So there was this whole huge religious component that was taking place in Taksim Square. Actually, I'll go back to the beginning. This bottom picture here, you can't really see it as well, but this is Taksim, where they had the manifesto the year before on green space. They had people killed because they wanted to maintain one green space in Istanbul, and the government wanted to build a shopping mall. So it was crazy that it dissolved into that. But I was standing in a cafe, a coffee house, and looking down, the tables here are set up for the end of the day feast, when they break the fast at the end of day. And over in this corner, 40,000 gay and lesbian people were gathering to do the Pride Parade. Total peaceful coexistence. There wasn't a single disrespectful word said. Nothing was happening. It was astounding.
The tables were set for religious people.
Exactly. The Gay Pride Parade took place down, this is one of the oldest streets of Istanbul called İstiklal. I think that's right, İstiklal. And 40,000 people took part in this. I know in São Paulo, the Gay Pride Parade is crazy, right? People are drunk, people are doing all kinds of things. Nobody had their shirt off, nobody drank, nobody did anything during this entire parade. It was astounding because it was all politically motivated. It was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. And in Chicago, it's almost embarrassing to take part in it. It's like all you see are people throwing up in the street and drunk, and I'm like, really? This is what we're supposed to be proud of? It doesn't make any sense. Let's get together. All right, so we'll go back to Istanbul. So my point being is that at the parade, the week before that, they had many, many different discussions and conversations about what it was like to be gay in Istanbul. Very open, very intellectual, all held in open, safe spaces. So it was a very, very powerful experience. What's your experience like with Pride here? For those of you that attend, I'm not trying to out you by saying that you go to the Pride Parade, but no experiences? Okay.
Very easy to see a
Uh-huh.
LGBTQ. It's a day we know a lot of great artists
Uh-huh.
here, and we met a lot of people from here in São Paulo, from another states,
Wonderful.
so we can build
Connections.
more contacts
Yeah.
from the their militant groups.
Very good. Any other observations?
I
What-
tell you
Go. Yeah, tell.
I was in the first place. There was like 200 people in the 90s. Then I saw it growing. And I was there when they depended a lot on us. And they're supporting. I'm not gay, just supporting. Right?
Yeah.
And it was very emotional when my students, for example, saw me at the parade. Right? When friends, a cousin saw me at the parade. Me and a lot of people who were sympathizantes at that time. We don't have that laughter, né? We actually super divertido.
Supporters.
Yes,
Yeah.
right? Supporters. Is that, you say that?
Yeah, we say LGBTQF,
Yeah.
friends.
But it's so,
Yeah,
nobody says that.
yeah.
But I mean, for me, it was a very strong, for me and my brother, who is a disabled person, but a very well-known writer and journalist, Marcelo Dias Paiva, who was there too, also, to when Grow to Peace on the LGBT parade every year just to support his friends and theater and literature, etc. to grow. So for me, I don't need to be there anymore, but you should. What I mean, for me, it's very emotional, seeing the history of the growing of this parade, of how much support gay people got to the youth, and they don't need more BS letters to be there.
No, I don't agree with that. I think friends,
I
friends and
that's
allies,
what I mean.
yeah.
For me, which is very, very
Mhm.
interesting, right, to see the history.
But I think Vera also does her work by teaching and having dialogues with her students about this. So that in and of itself is a friend and an ally to the LGBT community. And that's what we need. We need people that are comfortable. Because what if everybody looked at Vera and said, oh, she must be gay?
Oh, they did.
Yeah, she's a lesbian. Oh my God. You know.
And I
and-
say, yes, right.
yeah. So,
You know, last year, for the first time in years of parade, it reunited 40 trans men
ah,
from Brazil
okay. To
to
take part?
Visibility.
Yeah.
visibility.
Ah,
It's the first time, and after that, there is two groups of trans men.
ah, that's great.
For the people who doesn't see
Mm-hmm.
them,
Yeah.
it's very important.
Yeah, very often the trans community is very invisible, right? I notice actually in Brazil that they are more visible here than in the U.S. You know, they aren't supported. Yeah. So I don't really want to go through all of the methodological things. If you guys do have any questions, you're certainly welcome to email me and I can provide this. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the results. So we found three major themes in looking at all of the narratives. And then I'm still finishing incorporating all of the Istanbul data. But we're starting to see some overlaps. And what I did was highlight in red the ones that we identified with the US and Brazil, and then the addition of Istanbul. So the first one was internal mediators and internal factors that go on. And just to clarify, this is a process that goes on only within the person, okay? These are the thoughts that you have from the time that you're a young child, how you have integrated the information that you have so far, your feelings. The first time you're watching TV and you see a woman on TV and you're a girl and you go, oh my God, why am I attracted to her? Or you're a man or you're a boy and you look at a handsome man with big muscles and you're like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? I'm supposed to like women. You know, so you start these realizations, and it's very secret. It's very quiet. You don't really talk about it with anybody, right? So we found that there were 8 factors that played into this. One was self-acceptance. You will only move to the process of disclosing your identity when you accept yourself, right? And that's very difficult to do, to say, I am gay. Okay? Big step. The function of religion that's played in your life. All of the things that you've heard in church, all of the things you're going to go to hell, you're a sinner, you're this, you're that, these are all taken in. They become part of you. Experiences of discrimination. These are usually observed for other people. You don't necessarily are discriminated against yourself for being gay, but you're watching it. You're seeing it on TV. You're seeing kids teased in school for being too feminine, for being too butch, right? So you see these things, and you take this information in, and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. It's not good. It's not healthy. Internalized homophobia, right? People talk about gay people as being bad. We can't help but take it into ourselves because we believe it as the truth. The influence of heteronormative ideologies, right? Marriage between one man, one woman, blah, blah. You know, and how many times have you heard this? But it can't help but become part of you. Stages of disclosure, to be able to go through and figure out, well, maybe if I talk to and guys always talk to their best girlfriend, right? Hey, I'm thinking that maybe I might be thinking that I could possibly be gay. What? Oh, that's great. You know, the girls always love friends, right? You get to go shopping, you get to go do all these things together. But this is the first step of the process. You test. Who can I trust? Who can I tell? Access to information. We've talked about this a little bit. And then the results of negative experiences. And having a plan for if things don't go right, what am I going to do? And this is the one that I was talking about that's so critical and that we're seeing cut across all the cultures. Then we have relational factors. This is how you interact with the people around you, the things that you actually articulate, the things that you're willing to talk about. And this is a further stage. All of these stages are crisscross. They're a mess, right? You go back and forth along this process. It's like a continuum. Stages of divulging, deciding to share that you're gay. The events of disclosure, seeing that other people have disclosed, told people they're gay, watching their reaction, and then maybe you go up and you support them. Or you just think about, how did this event affect what I would like to do? Factors that come into consideration. Who you're going to tell, why you're going to tell. Why are you going to tell your mother instead of your father, right? These are all things, what we call cost-benefit analysis. Does the cost of it outweigh the benefit of doing it? And how will this impact my life? How it affects your trajectory, what your goals are for school, for occupation, for careers. It's very important, you know. You don't see too many gay doctors, right, that you know of. So if you want to be a doctor and you're gay, then you start to think, I shouldn't be a doctor. Why? You know, that's crazy. Don't give up your career. Don't give up who you are because of this piece of you. Being gay it's not all inclusive. It's not in totality who you are. It's a piece of you. That's all. Sexual traditions, gender binaries. What is a man like? What is a woman like? How does this, and until we start thinking about this on a continuum of experiences, we can't keep having these static binaries of this is macho, this is masculine, and this is feminine. Identifying with others, having role models. Sentirse no control. I'm having trouble with that one. How does that interpret? Does sentirse... No. Oh, okay. So having the... And then the experience of others, and then support systems, right? So these are all factors that happen when you relate to other people. Then we also found a theme related to the outcomes of the disclosure, some of the things that happen. One of the most important was the ability to have a discourse, to have a conversation about rights. That you can now participate as an out gay person, to have a voice, to be able to stand up for yourself, stand up for other people, participate in dialogues, keeping in mind that it's always a choice. You never have to do it, but it gives you the opportunity because you have this knowledge. For me, being a white, Anglo-Saxon, white male, I also have this wonderful diversity component of being gay. So, but I don't have to tell people that I am. I have to decide to share it with them, okay? So all of a sudden, being a white male that's full of privilege and power, I tell somebody I'm gay, one word, and you're completely moved over to the side. You're discredited very often. So this has to change. Being able to be an example to others, to educate, take part in NGOs, take part in activities that support being gay. Respect for family was a huge, not in the US, but in Brazil and in Turkey. The guys were much more worried about how their parents would feel and what their reaction was. In the US, the adolescents were like, I don't care how my parents feel, it doesn't matter. But here in other countries, in more collectivist, where family is more important, they worry about it and they want to respect their parents' feelings, which is really important. How they self-identify. You have an option now of a whole bunch of terminology, right? I can be gay, I can be queer, I can be a fag, I can be this, that, blah, blah, blah. You can shock people by saying, I'm queer, I'm a fag, or you can say, you know, how you can self-identify however you want. But for the first time, now that you've disclosed, you have the option. And that word, being a fag, when you call yourself that, it disempowers other people from being able to use that against you, right? It's like, you can say that, it doesn't make any difference to me. I'm past that. Identifying with your culture. Because religion can be so important, you have to figure out, now, how do I fit in? What do I have to do to feel a sense of citizenship, which is so critical. And then events that you take part in that will impact others. It's really important, you know, to have a voice, to be heard. So I encourage you guys to think about this as a process. It's not static. You don't come out only once. You come out every day. You have to tell people, you have to make this cost-benefit analysis with every single person you meet. And when people say, oh, they came out, they're all done. It's not true, right? It's a process that goes on through your entire life. But it gets better, right? The whole campaign about it gets better. You guys have seen this? And how you participate in it, too, is completely up to you. You now have power over yourselves because you make the decision about what you share. So I'd like to open it up to questions. I know we went a little bit over 45 minutes. Sorry, but I'm going to let you facilitate because I think people are either shy or they'd rather talk in Portuguese.
Okay, that was wonderful. Vocês querem fazer pergunta? A gente tem meia hora para pergunta e resposta. Eu posso. Can I begin with?
Absolutely.
Did it make the discourse of rights make the same sense in the three places?
It did.
It did.
It was
So
shocking.
it is shocking then. Okay. Vocês entenderam a pergunta? Se o discurso de direitos, porque foi algo que a gente elaborou aqui, fez sentido nos outros países também.
I'll tell a funny story about Turkey. In Turkey, when you're 18 to 21, you have to make a decision about the military. In the US, there's no mandatory military service. In Brazil, no mandatory, right? There is? At what age?
18.
18. Okay. So in Turkey, they have the option of not taking part in the military if they're gay. But what they have to do is produce a video of themselves having sex with another person, right? So their joke is that the Turkish military has the largest collection of gay pornography anywhere in the world. And they laugh about it. So what the only requirement is that they have a 6-month stay in the military. Turkish military is not involved in anything. They didn't even protect their own border when Syria was starting to come in. So nobody's worried about having to get killed by going in the military. It's just 6 months of your life that you have to take out. So again, cost-benefit analysis. Should I produce a video? Which they now no longer make you do. They outlawed that because it was discriminatory. But, you know, it's, I just found it comical. And the guys, when they were telling me this story, were laughing. So I think that that's a rights discourse where they feel empowered now. It's like, I don't have to shame myself. I don't have to do this ridiculous thing. Exactly. I have the right to not do this.
Sit? No?
Thank you.
I'm the old one here. E aí, gente? Gente, está sendo... Só uma pergunta. Rodrigo, que você estava mostrando ali, né? Nós vamos deixar isso no IPTV, tá? Então, se alguém ficar com vergonha, não quiser aparecer no IPTV, avisa, tá? Aí ele tira de cima de vocês, ok?
All the participants in your study, they are gay men, right?
Yes.
All of them. Do you intend to do another study with lesbians, transsexual people, transvestites, or do you know anyone who's doing something like that, something similar?
I'm actually encouraging my students.
There are people watching.
I'm actually encouraging my students to replicate the study in other cultures, and if they would like to do women or transsexual, transvestites, it's a very difficult construct to identify what the inclusion criteria is. Because we want the research to be very valid and clean, we have to identify what does that mean. Should transsexuals be interviewed with transvestites? Probably not, right? So we need to kind of create fine lines between those things just so that we gather data appropriately. But good question. When I first said I'm just doing the males, all of the women were like, why aren't you doing women? This is discrimination. I'm like, I can only do one thing at a time. Trust me, I want to.
You can do it. Vocês podem fazer. Uma boa ideia.
When you researched the gay man, have you concluded some difference between these people? Because Purpurina project has a specific public, that young men, gay, that have problems to accept themselves. But I guess that they are from the poorest, I don't know how to say, places of São Paulo. They aren't from the middle classes, and they aren't so much empowered than other kinds of gays. And have you seen these kinds of class difference and race difference in Chicago and Turkish and Kurdish Turkey, and I don't know, people?
Excellent question. Have you been to the project?
No, I worked in state place.
Uh-huh.
Public
Oh, the
place,
funds?
which had, how can I say, it's CRD, I don't know how to say
The funding?
Centro de Referência da Diversidade IPTV.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
literally. Well, I think that that's an erroneous assumption, that they're the poorest kids. There's very different classes that attend that. And when I did the interview, that was part of what I asked them, is what kind of a family situation did you grow up in? But I think economic, racial, social class has to be taken into consideration as different forms of culture. So that's an excellent question. And when we did the analysis, we didn't include that demographic because when you're doing a narrative qualitative study, their story is their story, right? So whether they grew up privileged or they grew up poor is irrelevant at the time they tell you the story. But if you want to, if we were going to look at quantitative variables, those are all very important, and I think that that's a wonderful question. Thank you. We have one here, and then...
Well, it drew my attention the picture that you showed on the iftar and the gay parade, and you also talked about how important it is to discover, to find out what we have in common. And my question is, did you find any gay religious groups in Turkey, and how do they behave with both manifestations, for instance, the iftar and the gay parade? Because here we have, as well in the States, many gay religious groups, Catholics or Protestants, but also in the Islamic cultures you have that as well. But how did you deal with this question?
There's a huge dissonance for them, that they feel like they can't in any way combine the two at this point. Keeping in mind in the Middle East, the language, Arabic language, doesn't really even have a term for homosexuality or being gay, right? They consider homosexuality the behavior of men with men, women with women. Being gay means that you've embraced the life of being gay. You are living together. You are trying to coexist. And this has no meaning. So in the Middle East, it's easy for them to make it invisible because they have no language for it. They're like, no, how can it exist? There's no word for this, right? So in religion, these young men have this huge dissonance because they want to be part of the religion. They want to be respectful to their families. And yet they feel like they are violating all of the laws of Islam by engaging in both the behavior and in the life. So it's a point that's, I think, way down the road before it gets resolved. But great question. Thank you. I think we had a question. Over here.
Hi, my name is Ramon.
Hi.
I would like to question, I like a lot the conception, the importance of being in a LGBT community, to experience LGBT culture.
Right.
Okay? Your focus is teenagers, okay? And thinking in Brazil, the places, the spaces to teenagers get access to LGBT culture is places that usually is outside the internet, involves some kind of sexual abuses, some kind of other kinds of violences.
Yeah.
Because we don't have teenager spaces. So I'd like to know in US, in Turkey.
Well, the project is for 14 to 21. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a little place, but I'm asking about another kind of places. Yeah.
To interact. Yeah. Right, because in the U.S. you have to be 21 to go to a bar, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so we do have one of the NGOs I worked with in Chicago was Youth Outlook, and they have these all through the city. There's 7 different social sites. Center on Halsted is exactly that. It's a place that people of any age can go because there's no restriction because of drinking or that kind of thing. So we're seeing more and more opportunities where we don't want it to be exclusionary, right? We don't want to discriminate against straight people either. We want, if we're looking for equality, then we have to have inclusion, right? So the Center on Halstead Youth Outlook is open to anybody. And the cue for them isn't queer, it's questioning. If you're questioning your sexuality, you can come to the group. Or if you're an ally, if you're a friend, you're welcome. So I think that these are important ideas to have. And I don't support that we separate ourselves as a community completely. I think that ideologically we have to have a safe space to be able to have conversations. But if we're going to really have citizenship, we need to feel comfortable being in any situation. But it's not realistic. It's not practical yet, right? It's a lot of work yet to do this.
Can you drink in these places?
No.
No.
Mm-mm.
It's a non-alcoholic place.
No. And I mean, the age of technology is that we have all of these social apps to be able to meet people. And you can choose to use those however you want, right? Scruff, Grindr, all of these things. We all know about them. We all know that they happen. But how you decide to interact on those sites is up to you. You have to protect your body. The AIDS crisis is far from over. You know, even though there's medications now that help, you know, people still have to protect themselves. So this whole culture of bareback and I'm not going to worry about it because I could take a pill if I get AIDS. No. Take care of yourselves. Respect yourselves. That's important. I know we just have a couple minutes left, so any other questions? That's okay.
The first one is, since you assume that there is a culture, a gay culture
Mm-hmm.
throughout all the nations, could you find any element that supports this vision of a gay culture around the world? In a global scale?
Uh-huh.
If you found any elements or interesting elements, we have some perhaps. The other question is, since we are being gay is only part of our identity, how do the other elements of our composition, composed identity, influence on this gay culture? And the third one is, what is your opinion or what's your interpretation of for the difference that we have between those gay pride parades in Istanbul and São Paulo?
Mm-hmm.
Since in Istanbul they have a more political motivation, and here we have a more
Mm-hmm.
other motivations than those political ones.
Excellent questions. So the first question is what evidence do I have that gay culture exists across the world, right? So I think it's kind of indisputable that every culture we have looked at has the behavior of homosexuality going on. And in the Middle East, it's perfectly acceptable for men to have sex with men, but they don't have to identify as being gay. You see men walking down the street holding hands, embracing each other. And I would be confused. I was like, so are they gay? No, they're probably just brothers or they're cousins, and they greet each other with kisses. And in Asia, we see this. On every continent, we see that people engage in this behavior and in the life of it. So I don't have hardcore evidence that in every single country in the world this exists. But you're right, it is an assumption that I'm making that it's likely, okay? The second part of your question was, can you restate?
How do the other parts of our composed identities influence?
I think that sociocultural development and your trajectory, your idea of where you want your life to go, you can allow the gay part of that to disrupt the rest of the flow, or you can embrace this as a piece of you and continue on with what your goals are. Unless you're planning on being in the military or something as an out gay man, You know, there's very few occupations that won't allow you to do this. We see politicians now as being out, right? We see CEOs, exactly. Yeah, you know, major corporations. And my best friend, his partner was the chief financial officer of Ford Motor Company. So finally, Alan came out, you know, and Ford Motor is like, what? You're a gay man? It's like, he's 58 years old. He's never been married. He doesn't have any children. He doesn't even date. What did you think? You know, it's like, come on. So I think that we're seeing more and more positive role models that allow us to have this. And then your final question about the difference in the parades, I think it really is influenced by the politics of the nation. In Turkey, if people misbehave, there's this element of respect where they don't want to cross the line because they want to have credibility. And if everybody says, oh, look at the gays, they're so impulsive, they can't control themselves, they're like animals, they're having sex in the street, they're doing all this crazy stuff, you know, which to me in Chicago is what happens, and it's embarrassing. I'm like, control yourself for a couple hours, you know, be respectful of yourself. So I think that the politics and the religion very much influences depending on how things go in a country. You're not going to get arrested if you kiss a man during Gay Pride in Brazil, right? Okay, in Turkey, you might. So they have to be very respectful, and because it was during a religious holiday, they were very conscious, and they passed flyers saying, please don't drink, please leave your shirt on, please behave appropriately during this. And it was really quite wonderful. That's me at Istanbul Gay Pride. So it was a very powerful experience. Any other thoughts or questions? Thank you for being such a wonderful audience, and I hope to read your research someday if you continue on. And if you have any interest in replicating the research, please contact me through Dr. Paiva, and I'm happy to talk with you about it. Have a great day.
I don't know most of them, Robert, just to tell you, okay? And I would like, eu queria perguntar, quantos de vocês estão na graduação? They are undergrads.
You have them do research.
Yeah, all right. No, but this is very good. Ok, eu queria só, então, agradecer muito a presença de vocês. Eram mais de 90 inscritos, mas assim costuma ser, né? E dizer que a gente tem alguns cursos onde esses temas estão sendo desenvolvidos na graduação, tá? Alguns, né? Eu acho que nas ciências sociais, quem está nas ciências sociais? Ninguém, né? Aqui na psicologia tem, em que vocês podem continuar pensando sobre esses temas. Há diversos grupos de debate, que acho que esses vocês devem conhecer, né? E a única coisa que eu queria dizer, né, é que then I translate that to you. A gente acabou de fundar uma rede de professoras contra a violência sexual e de gênero nessa universidade. Vocês estão sabendo, não? Tá? Então, eu estou contando para vocês, isso é uma reação aos atos de violência homofóbica, de gênero, transgênero, etc. Nós temos mais de 300 professoras e pesquisadoras, e há um grupo de professores homens que está se organizando para fazer também esse trabalho com a gente. Em função dos últimos acontecimentos, o que detonou foi o fato do menino que estuprou as meninas na Faculdade de Medicina, vai se formar daqui a 6 meses. Então, nós estamos montando esta rede, tá certo? Para protegê-los, é uma rede de proteção dos alunos contra a violência sexual de gênero. Nós vamos ter treinamento dos professores que já fazem isso espontaneamente, sem necessariamente ter passado por uma experiência de como fazer melhor. Vamos ter campanhas de divulgação contra a violência sexual de gênero que nós vamos produzir e vamos precisar de vocês para ajudar a disseminar, tá? E seria muito, muito importante que vocês estimulassem os professores homens a montarem uma rede. Há uma rede de alunas que parece que vai se formar finalmente, ou seja, sair dos pequenos grupos, né, a Geni, né, os diversos grupos LGBT, as feministas daqui e as dali, fazer uma rede de proteção e apoio de alunos, tá bom? Muito na direção daquilo que o Robert estava colocando, né? Porque, né, quer dizer, a universidade é também um lugar de coming out, é também um lugar de poder, e a gente quer criar um espaço seguro, né? Sem discriminação e sem violência para qualquer um que assuma uma identidade sexual de gênero diferente da heteronormatividade esperada, né? Eu acho que eu estudei nessa universidade nos anos 70, em plena ditadura, né? Estou aqui, fui e voltei, sou professora há quase 30 anos, eu nunca vi isso acontecer. Então, por mais que a gente tenha uma porção de situações de backlash, como se diz, né, de retrocesso, com as PLs no Congresso, o Cunha lá, né, o fundamentalismo crescendo, esse tipo de movimento me dá muita esperança de que a gente vai resistir ao backlash, de um lado, e avançar numa outra direção, nessa direção de acolhimento, de direitos, etc. Então, se vocês tiverem contribuição, procurem na sua faculdade, ou eu sou uma das pessoas que estou coordenando essa rede, a gente fica feliz, e se unam em rede. Vocês têm que sair né, da partitura do seu grupelho, gente. Se vocês não se reunirem em rede, a gente não consegue segurar e resistir nesse momento de backlash, de retorno ao passado. A resistência é fundamental, e a resistência se faz ampliando a rede e não encontrando e ficando só com quem pensa exatamente igual a gente, define os mesmos termos que a gente. Então, esse é um convite, né? Foi ótimo que o Robert pudesse estar aqui hoje, né? Porque ajuda a gente a organizar vocês, mas a gente vai fazer vários outros debates e vocês deviam tomar a iniciativa, ok? Tá? So thank you, Robert, for providing this.
I just had two quick things. One is that I wanted to let everyone know that we do have both a master's and a doctoral program at the Chicago School in international psychology that you can do completely online. Okay? So you don't have to go to the United States to take part. You can take part in these programs on the computer. The other thing is that we have groups, 12 students, 15 students that come twice a year for field experiences. And we're always looking for students from USP who would like to help us to show them around São Paulo and to help interpret and describe your culture. Yeah. Huh?
They come to a hotel.
Well, we travel all over the city, but you know, we would love to have people take part, and you can talk to Dalva about this if you're interested, because I think getting that academic experience for them to hear what it's like for you guys to be students is wonderful. They really need that. Okay? Thank you for your attention and your time.